Can you see anything? Hi, good morning. If everyone can find a seat, we're going to get started. Thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Barbara Blake-Boy. I'm the Executive Director of the Broward County Planning Council, and it's a pleasure to kind of be in this space again for talking about updating the Broward County Land Use Plan and BrowardNext in the process. A couple of housekeeping items. If I can just ask you to silence your cell phones. You will need your cell phones if you have them available. We will be doing some Menti questions during the presentation. We'll get to that in just one second. For participation, all participants, if you haven't signed in, please take an opportunity to sign in. It is just an ArcGIS survey, so just put in your name and your whatever agency or whoever you are representing. That also goes for anyone who's participating online. Please feel free to ensure that you sign in. Also, any questions that we received today that may not be addressed, if we do run out of time, I don't think we will, but in case we do run out of time, we will take the opportunity to kind of create a response document and publish that on the BrowardNext website. Please do try to hold your questions and comments to the end because perhaps it's going to be addressed as we make our way through the presentation. And virtual participants, please enter your questions or comments in the chat on the Vimeo webcast. Only on the Vimeo webcast. If you're on YouTube, we won't be able to, we're not monitoring that, so Vimeo only, which is the webcast link that was sent out in all of the constant contact emails and my emails. So thanks again for joining us today. We're the Planning Council staff. We're all over the room except for our attorney who's joining us virtually, Andy Marotis. I'm Barbara Boyd. Deanne Von Cetina is our Assistant Director. Don Tietzel, our Director of Planning. They're up here managing the chat. We have Kim Rudeminer in the back of the room. She was kind of helping welcome you. She's our GIS project manager. Huda Ashwa is a planner. She's in the back of the room. She'll have a microphone for questions. Alicia Joseph, also a planner in the back of the room. She'll have a microphone for questions also for the side of the room. And then Leslie Nelson, also in the back of the room. So that's just our staff. So we try to all wear Planning Council clothes. So if you see us, if you're looking for us, that's an easy way to find us. The Menti instructions, I'm sure most of you have had the opportunity to use this platform before. If you use this QR code or the access code, 7845-8968, that's 7845-8968, or use the QR code. I'll give you a second, and that will take you through, we have about 5 questions, an icebreaker, and then 4 kind of planning related questions that we'll do during the presentation. So it's menti.com, and then the access code is 7845-8968, or scan the QR code. The agenda for today. Welcome and opening remarks. I think we've pretty much covered that so far. I'm going to take you through a historical perspective of planning in Broward County and really the genesis of that, the update of the Broward County Land Use Plan that took place from 2014 to adoption in 2017, take you through that process, what those updates were, what the policy directives, and kind of the evolution of that. And I think why that's so important. The next part is we will talk about the land use plan updates since the 2017 adoption. So I think one of the really great things about county land use planning is we are constantly evolving. So we never let it stay static. So when the update had happened from 2014 to 2017, it had been a while since a holistic update. And although we had been updating the plan annually, we continue to do that since the update. So I think that gives us a really great foundation for this update this time around. I will give you also an overview of what staff put together as the general framework for this update. I'll take you through each of the sections of the plan, what we've identified, and then that document is posted to the BrowardNext website. So you'll be able to actually see the text of it. So if you have comments directly on that, it won't just be based on the presentation today. You'll have access to the document. We'll talk about the updated timeline, kind of the roadmap from where we are today and how we're going to kind of get to the end of this process. Let's keep in touch. We'll talk about all those different components, and then questions and comments. So with that, also just want to note that the BrowardNext page, so that's broward.org/BrowardNext, we will have the presentation, it is already there today because obviously we're not doing handouts, but the presentation is there today if you're interested in pulling that up on your phone or tablet or computer. So I'm going to take us back to 1977 for just a second. And, there's some people in this room who weren't even born in 1977. There are some people in this room that were born before 1977. That's me. So a little historical perspective. What were we talking about in the 70s? A lot of people were driving big station wagons. We were watching some really great television. Saturday nights were my favorite. The the Love Boat, Fantasy Island, all those kinds of things. I was looking through the Sears catalog as like a 6-year-old, tabbing the pages for what I wanted for Christmas. And, I put it like kind of in my parents' thing. Just to assure you, I never got anything from that, but it was a good exercise. It was kind of like, that wish list that you're creating. Now we have Amazon wish lists and you kind of just go in and drop everything in, but that was the old days, going through 500 pages. Star Wars came out in 1977, so that's kind of a fun movie. And then also in 1977, this big graphic to the right, Broward County Land Use Plan. So this was the very first countywide land use plan in Broward County. And I have 2 copies of it in our office. We have it scanned so that we will never lose it. If you're interested in ever seeing it, I would be happy to share a copy with you. It's a really interesting document to kind of just take a look at, get a perspective of what was happening in Broward County and kind of what were the expectations for long-range planning. And that was, I wouldn't say it was new because we had an area planning board, but it was certainly, it was kind of at the forefront of planning. And also in the 70s, what else was happening was there was still a large amount of unincorporated land. We'll get to the Planning Council's role and the county land use plan in a few slides later, but I want to take you through our first Menti question, which is an icebreaker. So this is a very important question for everyone. I think we have a little lag. What do we see? Can you see it on your phone? You can't get the code? The access code is 7845. Sorry, I have to put my glasses on. It's really small on my paper. 78458968. Menti.com, or you can scan the QR code. That's right there. So it is. Can you see the question? It should be on the screen, but it's not. Here it is. Star Wars was released in 1977. Did you see it in the theater? Yes. My parents made me watch it when I was growing up. What is Star Wars? And the final answer is I'm more of a Trekkie. So let's just make sure that the Mentimeter is working, and please just provide your responses. We have a couple people who've seen it in the movie theater. But my parents made me watch it is definitely catching up. Okay, so we will go on to the next slide. Thanks for participating, and if you don't have the code or haven't scanned it, the code again is 78458968 for the later questions, or scan the QR code. So an overview of planning and development in Broward County. Let's just talk about population growth. If you build it, they will come. So Broward County, we'll see in some slides in just a few seconds, the growth and the population growth and the development to the west to the basically what was established as the urban boundary, as that became clearer through the years also. Here's your Menti question number 2. Menti question number 2, there's a little lag, sorry. Or no lag, or just a blue screen. What is the most predominant land use designation in Broward County? Commerce, low-density residential, conservation, or activity center? Mike Jorgensen in the back. Someone in the audience is saying we have to allow new responses. He's working on it, sorry. We did test it earlier before the meeting, I promise. Okay, here we go. Low-density residential is in the lead. Conservation. Commerce. Okay, so I think we have a clear winner here, that low-density residential. But really, let's look at the map. Conservation, right? It's something that people often forget about, is that 2/3 of Broward County is conservation potable water supply, the Everglades. And that's actually the predominant land use in Broward County. When we move into the urbanized area, you do move into low density residential in the urbanized area, and for Broward County as a whole, conservation. So it's kind of a trick question, but it's a reminder to everyone that we do have 2/3 of the county designated as conservation. The next question, hopefully it will let you submit responses. And I do remember what this question is, and it is, what year did Broward County hit 1 million residents? So your questions, 1 million residents, 1960, 70, 80, or 90? 1980 and 90 are in the tie right now. Oh, we'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, so 1980. 1980 is the right answer. That is the year that the county hit 1 million residents. And we'll see that, kind of take you through the graphics, the development of Broward County. Here we are in the 1400s, so we have no population numbers for that year. But you can kind of see 1793, the county's starting to take form. You can see the waterway system, and that kind of is the beginning of the transportation system in Broward County. You see the development, you see Fort Lauderdale kind of in the middle, and Dania Beach and Hollywood starting to form to the south. 1895, a little bit more of the same. 1915, that year is important because that is the year that Broward County incorporated, and the population is just over 4,700 residents. 1920, we're already at 5,100 residents, but we're starting to take form. And you really start to see it starting to take off in the 40s. Here's 1960. 1970, we start seeing the beginning of the urban boundary to the south. 1980, the year that we hit over 1 million residents. And we can see that the kind of north of 595 is already starting to extend west, but to the south, I would say it's more just a little bit west of the turnpike down there. Obviously the 90s changed that with Hurricane Andrew, when we really saw the explosion of development to the west, in Pembroke Pines and Miramar. 2000, we're 1.6 million residents, and we look like we're built out, but there's still infill development happening. It's still going on. 2010, the same. Population has grown to over 1.7 million. 2020, 1.94 million. Our estimate this year, 1.978. So, we're seeing in-migration, but some out-migration also. Just an estimate for this year. The county role in planning. This is the information that I promised, talking about the Broward County Charter, the Planning Council, the Land Use Plan, and the Comprehensive Plan. So essentially, it started with 1977 because that was the important date. The charter was approved in 1974, the county charter, and that's what established countywide land use authority and established the Planning Council as the local planning agency to the county commission. We started with, there used to only be, before 1998, there was only 7 county commissioners. So every county commissioner appoints 2 planning council members, 1 elected and 1 non-elected. We have a school board member and we have a county commission member every year. So we were at 16 for many years. After 1998, when we changed to 9 county commissioners, we moved to 20 planning council members. The planning council's role, like I said, is the local planning agency to the county commission, which is much akin to many of the cities, their planning and zoning boards. It's a group of both electeds and non-electeds, and we have representation from all over the county. And the role that they really play is it's many roles, but primarily they're making recommendations regarding map amendments to the county land use plan, text amendments to the county land use plan, which have been initiated by either the county commission or the planning council. We recertify local plans. So if you're amending your local future land use element only, we have a recertification process for the text or map of those, but that is only the future land use element. The planning council nor the staff, we do not play a role in your other elements unless you're using that element or that policy to meet a requirement of the county land use plan. So that's probably a separate workshop that we could have, because long-range planning is almost a lost art between how the statutes work and how the county system functions. But we're happy to talk about it anytime, and we're always available to the cities or agents when you have questions about those processes. So the Planning Council meets monthly or bi-monthly, just depending on what they have. Their recommendations are forwarded to the County Commission. So the 1977 county plan, that was that page that I showed you, that was the first countywide land use plan. After the state legislature adopted growth management legislation in the mid-'80s, the county did update its plan in 1989, and that was a holistic review of the plan. It took a lot of the information and data from the 1977 plan and kind of forwarded it, modernized it in that time. How we ended up with the initial BrowardNext was that 1989 plan had never been holistically reviewed. So BrowardNext from 2014 to 2017 was really the process that we used to go through every word of the plan, every policy, every permitted use, what's still, what matters, what can we do better, what can be changed. And as I mentioned earlier, while that plan was amended, each year to always keep things improving and evolving, there had never been that holistic review. So that's what we did from 2014 to 2017. So that's how we ended up. And then also, as part of that, we said every 7 years we need to take this holistic review of the county plan, because don't let that stagnate. We can always do better. And as staff and as the Planning Council, we're always striving to make improvements, find tools that will help the local governments move forward in redevelopment. So that's really kind of the goal of the Planning Council and the staff as we represent the Planning Council. So that's the Broward County Land Use Plan, and I think most people in this room know that every city's land use plan has to be at least as restrictive as the county plan. So you can be more restrictive, but you cannot be more liberal. So if there's for example, the maximum just regular residential density maximum, not inside an activity center, is 50 dwelling units per acre on the county plan. So a city can't exceed that maximum, but they can always be beneath that. Or if you have residential, on the county plan, you can't have, say, industrial on the city plan. So those are just a couple examples. I just want to mention the Broward County Comprehensive Plan, all of the other elements. Those were also updated at the conclusion of the 2017 BrowardNext process, and those were adopted in March 2019. That was a thorough review of those elements and update of those to modernize those as well. We talked about the Broward County Charter in the 70s, and I think when we're talking about development in the 1970s and 80s, we're talking about lower density. We did identify that low-density residential is the predominant land use in urbanized Broward County. Auto-oriented design. We have a roadway system. We have a transportation system. That is a grid system, and it is auto-oriented. We see a lot of low-density residential. With commercial, as you expect, along the arterials, but a very suburban model. So we identified this disconnect with that vision, and that's what we really tried to address in the 2014 to 2017 update, was that disconnect and how, as I mentioned, do we work with the cities to provide more opportunities for redevelopment. A history of growth. So if you look at the graph, obviously growing. We've kind of studied out once we got to 1 million. We don't see as great of increases each decade from there, but we have increased 1.3 million residents in the past 50 years. Well, 54 years, 1970, but that's okay. Census years. Future growth. By 2050, Broward County is anticipated to have at most 675,000 new residents. It's a lot of people. Where are they going to go? I'm not really sure. Joe's going to talk more about that during the housing piece of it, population forecast modeling. But it's a lot of growth. I think as many of you are residents of Broward County besides working in Broward County, and I think, you know, a lot of what we're going to see and what we've seen is these redevelopment opportunities along the transportation corridors and really maximizing those and that density. So I'm going to take you through all the really great things that happened in 2017 with the adoption of BrowardNext. And we're going to go through kind of by category. I won't touch on everyone. As I mentioned, this presentation is posted online for the detail if you're missing any detail or you want more information. So for climate change resilience, further mitigation and adaptation strategies consistent with the county's adopted climate action plan adopted into the county land use plan. Utilizing priority planning areas as part of the land use plan amendment review process. And that's, if you're not familiar with that natural resource map, also available online, it kind of identifies, it identifies areas that are subject to sea level rise by 2070. And then that data is updated every 5 years with the best data. So when we're reviewing map amendments to the land use plan, that's part of the data and criteria that we are utilizing to determine consistency with the county plan. Supported adaptation action areas. Right now, we only have one adaptation action area, and that's in Port Everglades for the sand bypass area, but we do have that laid out in the county plan. Targeted redevelopment. I think, you know, redevelopment, housing, transportation, that was really the meat of the BrowardNext update. So retaining the county approval requirements for activity center designations, supporting smart growth policies, supporting the Broward redevelopment program, including using those funds for affordable housing proposals. The enhanced review for development on the barrier island. I think this is something that is really important on a regional basis, how we protect the barrier island, how we ensure that there's policies in place to do an adequate analysis of those proposals, and how can we encourage redevelopment but still limit density on the barrier island. We retained the land use plan, the golf course conversion policies. And if you're not familiar with that, those have been in place for about 15 years. And it's a strategy that the local governments in the county can use to ensure open space requirements continue to be met, ensure that environmental assessments are done. There's a lot of historical trees on golf courses, the drainage, connection with neighborhoods. So those policies continue to be in play as part of the 2017. Compatibility review requirements, and that really goes to the protection of single-family neighborhoods. I think if you're just kind of summarizing that, protection of single-family neighborhoods, that's important to local governments and to neighborhoods. Retaining requirements for adequate public facilities and services, including public school concurrency. Multimodal, continue to support the context-sensitive implementation of complete streets, retaining port and aviation policies that are important for the growth of Broward County, and then also retaining the Broward County Traffic Ways Plan dedication requirements. And just to touch on Traffic Ways Plan dedication requirements for a second, we talked a few minutes ago just about kind of the grid system that's established in Broward County. And I always say that the Traffic Ways Plan is one of those tools that someone had the foresight in the 60s, or a group of people in the 1960s, to ensure those dedications. So that's, for better or worse, how we've kind of ended up with this grid system, and how that right-of-way has been able to, essentially, it's been worth billions of dollars to the county and local governments to have that traffic ways dedication requirement in place. Natural resource protection and enhancement. This is just a carryover, not just a carryover, but I think it goes to saying environmental protection has always been a really important piece of Broward County in its past, and I think in its future. So continuing that role, maintaining the county land use plan requirement for 3 acres per 1,000 permanent residents, ensuring that historical, archaeological, and paleontological resources are protected during the land use plan amendment process. The county opposes fracking, which we'll talk about again in a minute, because that policy was actually strengthened since the adoption of BrowardNext, and supporting and compatible urban agriculture. Affordable housing. Retaining the county land use plan amendment affordable housing review requirements for a standardized methodology. That's what we call policy 2.16.2. Before BrowardNext, it was 10707, so kind of these numbers that go around. And that's essentially any land use plan amendment that is proposing more than 100 new units to the county land use plan is required to submit an analysis of how the city that it's going to be in is addressing affordability, what kind of policies they have in place. There's an option if you don't want to submit that study, that an applicant can commit to an affordable housing commitment or in lieu of fee, which we will also talk about in a few minutes. We're talking about identifying sustainable funding sources for affordable housing. How can the plan also authorized affordable housing density bonus programs that were increased from what had been in place in the '89 plan. And actually, since this adoption, we'll talk about that again, they were further enhanced. So 2017 plan enhanced those, also subject to a further enhancement. The county plan also put in place a tool for cities to use if they want to, that counting units less than 500 feet as a half of a dwelling unit instead of one dwelling unit for density calculation purposes. So that was kind of something that we thought was important, and I think there had been interest during that time because it's been 7 years. I think we're starting to see more interest in that now. So I think that was very positive. Also authorized in this plan is alternative construction techniques. And again, maybe it was a little bit before its time, but I think that's going to become more and more important as we move forward and try to identify affordable housing and housing affordability solutions. Renewed intergovernmental partnership. So these are things that kind of are unique to county planning, the county and city relationship. Flex rules is really this kind of weird thing that happened in the county plan, right? So when flex rules are the difference between the county plan and the city plan, just to put it in like basic words. But there were 125 flexibility zones. The county was divided up that way. So every city, most cities, had many flexibility zones, and those units kind of got trapped in there. So one of the things that we did with BrowardNext was kind of remove that obstacle, because those units probably weren't appropriate for redevelopment opportunities. They were maybe trapped in single family or low density neighborhoods. So the unification of flex zones was authorized by the county plan, and it really is just an administrative process for cities to go through to create their single unified flex zone. And I think we have about 18 or 19 cities. So most cities have gone through that process through the years. And I think it's really, it's loosened it up for cities and given them more opportunities. To eliminate flex units, because it's this weird concept and it's a lot of math, we came up with an alternative, what's kind of the next tool that we could have, and that's the redevelopment unit tool. And that was 3% of the total units at the time of the adoption of BrowardNext in 2017. So we have a pool of about 34,000 units, more or less. And cities only can apply for those at 500 or 750 unit increments if they have an affordable housing component that they're committed to. So we've had about 4 cities go through that process and start drawing down. And the limitation with that is that basically you have to almost be out of flex units to be able to apply for those. The county plan also in 2017 authorized that if a city has an activity center, they can do a local amendment to authorize an increase to the residential or non-residential component without coming through the county land use process at a threshold level. We've had a couple cities that have also done that because perhaps they don't want to grow their activity center exponentially, but they need a few extra units to kind of make things happen. So that's been, I think, a successful tool also. It's authorized the Municipal Transfer of Development Rights Program. I think we've only seen 2 cities come in with that, authorizing it in their plan, but we've only seen 2 cities so far, and I think the value in the Transfer of Development Rights program is that it leaves the donor site as either a historical resource, a park, an environmental site. So there is a value for local government for adopting that transfer of development rights if they're facing those sorts of issues or kind of ideas with the development community. One of the revisions to platting requirements was increasing the threshold from 5 acres to 10 acres. And while this discussion today isn't really focused on platting, I would like to mention that we're always looking for new ways to exempt sites from platting. So if you're involved in the platting process and you're sending an applicant to our office for a platting determination, the first thing that we're trying to identify as staff is, does it meet an exemption? And those exemptions are laid out in the administrative rules document. And one of the reasons we transitioned them from the county plan to the administrative rules document is because the administrative rules document doesn't have to go through the statutory 163 process. So it's much easier. It's just a hearing at the Planning Council and at the County Commission for adoption. So we do take that very seriously. We're always listening to people, when they are trying to give us ideas. We've encouraged a couple of platting interpretations in the past couple years because the rule change was going to make sense, and then that's been incorporated into the plan. So that's what we've done with platting. And then the supporting of environmental and social justice for underserved populations. Shifting to regional policy issues. Some of these are really related to kind of the map part of the county land use plan, not just the text, so the text and the map. So the county collapsed the commercial, industrial, employment center, and office park non-residential categories into a single category called commerce on the county plan. So that really made a difference because it allows local governments to maintain that distinction, but doesn't require a county amendment if you're changing non-residential category. So we've seen a reduction of amendments for those types of amendments also. We collapsed all of the former mixed-use categories into a single activity center category. Because what we really found is that these, the former regional activity center, local activity center, transit-oriented corridor, transit-oriented development, mixed-use residential, which we had never had an application for, we've really found that they were all trying to accomplish very similar things. So let's just call it activity center on the county plan. There's one section in the plan that addresses all of those adopted categories. And it also maintained the adopted intensities and densities on there. collapsing the community facilities and utilities category into a single community designation on both the map and text. Streamlining the plan is what we were going for with that. Allowing for the minimal conversion of recreation open space land up to 5 acres to permit community or public uses, subject to criteria such as the local government being able to demonstrate that they're still meeting 3 acres per 1,000 permanent residents, and that there's open space that is functional for its residents. The county adopted a recommended practices section. So these are policies that the county does not require but encourages. So I think those are kind of reflective of kind of what the topics were in 2017, and I think there's still value to them, but when we get into kind of the framework, we'll talk about maybe how we can shift some of those and maybe make those better. Such things as discouragement of food deserts. Preservation of marine industry uses, which obviously is really important to Broward County. Safe routes to schools and parks, and reduction of light pollution. And what you'll see in the framework is we have a couple of ideas of things that can be modified in there, maybe move. There may be a couple policies that maybe it's time to move them to the actual policy section as a requirement, those kinds of considerations. So this is just a background, nothing to read here, except for this will also be posted online. So since 2017, the BrowardNext adoption, how have we kept the plan up to date in the last 7 years? So these are just kind of what's popping up on your screen, and what's populating are really some of the highlights of that. Establishing the seawall ordinance for the height to contend with sea level rise. Updated the priority planning area map, which I mentioned, every 5 years to ensure that we always have the best data included in the plan. We updated and expanded those readopted bonus density formulas that we talked about. So in 2017, I want to say if you were doing moderate, which is up to 120%, for affordable housing, you could get 2 or 4 units, depending on where you were located. So with the update of bonus density formulas, if you're doing 1 moderate unit, you can get 6 bonus units. If you're doing 1 low income up to 80%, you can get 9 bonus units. If you're doing very low, up to 50%, you can get 19 bonus units for your development. And I know a lot of this, there's no limitation on the county plan. A lot of this is limited by local plans and height and site development, but there's no limitation there. Established residential by right and commerce and activity centers. We like to refer to that as the Geller policy, or policy 2.16.4, which is how I like to refer to it because I'm kind of more of a policy person. So that allows residential by right if you are on a qualifying arterial, and we have a map that we can use to help you identify that. And it's subject to other site planning criteria, but there's no allocation of flexibility units or redevelopment units required by this. It is residential by right. And it's a really important question, I think, or a statement to make, because we get phone calls all the time asking us, well, we have to allocate flex. No, you don't. It's residential by right. So I think that's a very positive policy, and by our survey this year, we've started to see real use of the policy along the transportation corridors. We've expanded the resiliency review. It already included the county's climate action plan. We've expanded it to the regional climate action plan during the review of county amendments also. Residential by right and community. Right now, this is really restricted to lands that are owned by a local government within its jurisdiction, county-owned lands, or school board-owned lands. And it allows for residential by right if you meet the affordable housing requirement and criteria set out there. That was just adopted, in the spring? It was adopted earlier this year. But that is in the plan. So that's a tool that local governments can use. I think as part of BrowardNext, I think there should be a consideration of the expansion of that But the county wasn't ready for it, right? But now we have the foundation in place, and we can think about how this can be expanded and utilized. And then also, it's going to be adopted just in about 3 weeks, expanding that 2.16.4 Geller policy that we talked about to residential by right and commerce within a half mile of passenger rail stations. And during the affordable housing part of the presentation at 10:30, we have some slides that show the graphics of that. So that's really primarily the tri-rail stations and the Brightline station. Oh, here we are, question number 4. This is so exciting. I'm gonna take a sip of water. So if we can see what question number 4 is. Do you think the 2017 BrowardNext changes streamline the long-range planning process? Absolutely? Meh. No way. Be kind, please. So nice news for us. Absolutely seems to be the winner. Thank you for your kindness. Nah, I understand. It's a different kind of system we have here in Broward County. So any rule seems like a rule, and seems maybe be in the way. You two that said no way, I'm just kidding. No, I appreciate it. So just kind of a look at how things kind of happen and are changing, and thank you for that. So what are we looking for 2024? The framework highlights. This is everything that we're going to see here and go through for each of the sections of the county plan is in a document that is posted to the BrowardNext website. So the content of all of this will be there. And there's many more words than we're going to have today. But I think it's a great opportunity for you to take a look at it and review and kind of add your comment and see what we miss, what did we miss, or what should, yes, this is the best one, you should really be focused on this. So in the highlighted regional issues section of the plan, which was new also with the 2017 update, really we're just talking about, I think, cleanup, housekeeping items. And the 7 topics that are included in the highlighted regional issues correspond to what we just talked about: climate change, targeted redevelopment, multimodal, environmental protection and enhancement, housing affordability, which really should be affordable housing because that's actually what it says in the plan, disaster planning and post-disaster redevelopment, and the renewed intergovernmental partnership. Oh, one more question. This is the last one. So the final question is, we just talked about those topics. And the final question for today is, I know you're, okay, what is the most important regional issue facing Broward County as we look at this update? Mobility, climate change, affordable housing, environmental preservation, redevelopment. 0 for environmental preservation? I'm just kidding. I think we already have a clear winner defined here: affordable housing. And I think that these other pieces all play a role in it. And I think that's really one of the things that we realized going through the update of the county plan, is that while these are individual kind of planning ideas, they all work together. So none of them are singular and alone. When we're talking about affordable housing, we're talking about access to transportation. We're talking about how people are moving around the county. So I think they all play together. But thank you for your input on that. So the next section of the county plan is the policies section. And this is, we have a few slides on this. So some of the things that we're thinking about that could be improved or modified in the county plan for policies. How do we count single occupancy residential density calculations? And this kind of plays into the half unit. How do we kind of come up with that idea? We had a plat it's been 6 or 7 years ago, but they were, there was like communal kitchens, and how do we count that? And I think we're at the point in time where we need to, really look at how that density is calculated. And again, when we're talking about this for the cities can always be more restrictive. We give, we're doing kind of like an authorization, but the city plans do not have to go as high and can always, do what's the right thing for their city or limit it to certain areas that way. We're looking at modernizing and any policy protecting single-family neighborhoods. I think we've seen a lot of that when we've gone through some policy considerations like the bonus density formulas or the community uses to allow residential. We've heard a lot of input about the protection of single-family neighborhoods. So can we do something better in the policy section to make sure that that's reflected? Updating better affordable housing. What can we do? More affordable housing, more opportunities, more incentives. I think obviously based on this quick question that we just had, it's obviously in the forefront of everyone's mind. Whether you live here or in another county nearby, we see the struggles every day, not just of perhaps people that are below the 50% mark, but it just seems like everyone. So what kind of incentives that can we look at? What can we improve? One of the things that we were putting together this document for the framework was right now there's a buyout for 216.2, the policy we talked about for land use plan amendments, and the in lieu of buyout for that policy as of today is $1 per square foot. So that was adopted in 2015, and think about how much things have changed. And I think that there should certainly be a reconsideration of that payout or in lieu amount to be in line with policy 216.4. So then everything would have the same. And obviously this is just ideas that we have and it'll be subject to public hearings and public input, but I think the time is right to reconsider that, because those funds either go to the city that the amendment is in, if they have the mechanism to use that, or they go to the county for Ralph Stone to use on some tax credit projects or whatever he can kind of work his magic with that money. For 216.3, that's the bonus density policy. I think examining additional densification opportunities for that bonus density. Right now, if you're residential, you're limited to 50 units per acre. It's time to re-examine that limitation with consideration for the single-family neighborhoods, of course, but reconsideration of 50. Is 50 still the appropriate maximum density for the county plan? Especially like on or near transportation corridors. So I think that's something very important to look at. When I say I think, it's me, but really this is the framework that the council is moving forward also. Residential by right, examine the inclusion of additional land use designations such as medium to high residential densities within a half mile of passenger rail stations. That was a comment that we got when we were considering the rail stations. And while at that time I was like, okay, well, that's addressed by bonus density. If you're doing affordable housing and it's restricted and you're within a half mile, you can still do it regardless of this policy. But I think, we should consider what designations are appropriate for that. Also, the expansion of the new community use, how can we kind of make that work? Privately held community use, maybe there's, I work with Habitat for Humanity sometimes on a land committee, and we talk a lot about religious institutions and kind of these tracts of lands that they thought they were going to build a school on, so opportunities that could arise there to allow for affordable housing opportunities that are integrated into neighborhoods. I think that's something important to examine also. Also, still in the policy sections, I think we're going to see a re-review and consideration of climate resiliency policies, strengthening those, perhaps the new vulnerability study outcomes. I think that's going to be ready this fall, how that can be incorporated into the plan, updated groundwater mapping, whatever we have available, can that go in the natural resource series? natural resource map series, what's appropriate for that. Updating and modifying environmentally sensitive land section. There's a conflict for me, and this is kind of a higher level conversation because not everybody has to deal with this, but there seems to be some conflicts when we're talking about environmentally sensitive lands and just the process that we work through with the Code of Ordinances, which I think could be improved for applicants in the county. Multimodal levels of service, complete streets, greenways, trails, reflect updated policies such as the 30-year transportation surtax plan. What can we do to modify those, improve those? We've been struggling. I've been with the Planning Council since the year 2000, and we have been struggling with multimodal level of service the entire time and how it works and how we get there. So I think that there's there's definitely a gap in just always considering how we can make things better. The definitions section, we holistically updated this in 2021, but we'll review it for consistency and consideration of additional definitions. So that's, anything's on the table for the definitions, because I think that's also important when we're talking about bonus density or those opportunities. The permitted uses section, some of this is just really kind of cleanup. We had an interpretation earlier this year about student generation rates and unit type, and so we're anticipating kind of cleaning up the text of that to reflect this positive interpretation. The addition of affordable housing opportunities. This is a suggestion that we had already on lands designated recreation and open space. So the idea on this would be to mimic the community facilities permitted use and criteria of up to 5 acres, and then continuing the criteria. So I think that, I think this will be a lot of discussion, but this is part of what we're talking about. There's parks that do have land that's not utilized as a park. Perhaps it's vacant land. It could be part of an expansion. Could it provide an affordable housing opportunity? And all of this is said when we're talking about recreation and open space to ensuring that there are still open space opportunities available for all of your residents. So this is not saying we're just going to we're just going to chip away at open space. It's managing the expectation and how that could work. Special residential facilities, a little cleanup. We have some inconsistencies with Florida statute and the old special residential 1, 2, and 3. So we'll make sure that that's modified to accurately reflect Florida statutes. A redirection of the the dash line area land use designation. This is an idea that we had several years ago, but again, I don't think the time was right. But this is kind of more of a look, and I see Bill Lystrom smiling because he was kind of one of the first applicants to come through with this, and I think that's where we kind of generate the idea from. But an idea of dash line areas really used to be perhaps a large area around a golf course, and it allowed for an overall density. So you would see a mix of uses. Maybe you would see condominiums and single-family homes all within the dash line area with an overall density of 17 units per acre. But really, some of them were developed at 50 or 60 units per acre. So I think the time is right. We don't have DRIs anymore. We don't have these large redevelopment areas, but how can we make that tool work for local governments? Instead of going through maybe establishing an activity center, is there a way to encourage increased density and smart development and combining residential and non-residential uses? So I think that's another tool that we can start adding to the toolbox. And I see my note here, consistent with the Broward County Affordable Housing Master Plan recommendations, right? Any increase in density or densification is really consistent with those recommendations that were made part of that plan. The implementation section, we're actually started this last year, and we're heading into adoption for this. And this is an update of both the parks and open space criteria and the implementation section. And the real work in this section is what opportunities can we help local governments identify to increase their parks and open space acreage that's available. And we really focused on 4 things. We focused on golf courses, how much acreage that a local government can count towards the 3 acres per thousand, increasing that threshold. Public beaches, right now as the county plan is, it has to be owned by the local government, expanding that to publicly owned lands to be able, for cities to be able to count that towards open space. Oh my gosh, beaches, private recreational spaces, lowering the threshold from a half an acre to 0.25 of an acre. As cities redevelop, half an acre may have been too high of a threshold. So increasing those opportunities. And then the 4th piece was related to county parks. Right now, the county plan limits how much acreage, if a county park is located within it, to 10 acres. This would increase the threshold to up to 25% of that. And it doesn't take anything away from the county, but it could help some of the cities as the population grow, identify that in their plan. And then the second half of the section is really just a reordering and updating of those regulations. Recommended practices. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Is there anything that we could consider moving from the recommended practices that it's time for it to become a policy, whether that's related to food deserts? Should we be talking about the reduction of heat islands? Should that be in the policy section? So I think that there's some ideas in here that we'll be able to incorporate into both the regular policy section and then improve the recommended practices section. The natural resource map series, there's some cleanups and refinements that need to happen here. Again, on the environmentally sensitive lands, it really needs a cleanup because some of those environmentally sensitive lands have been developed through the years for whatever reason, so those need to come off the map. So we really need to take a very careful look at that. Updating the floodplains map to add the coastal storm area for a corresponding policy, just making sure that those maps are the best tools that local governments and the development community have as they're identifying areas for redevelopment. So then the corresponding implementation document, the administrative rules document for BrowardNext. I think there's 3 things kind of highlighted here. In Article 3.5, if you have over 25 dwelling units per acre, you're allowed to incorporate, without the allocation of the old flex rule, non-residential into the building. I think it's time for the consideration of a unified development and horizontal incorporation of that use also. So kind of just making the policy maybe more user-friendly and more realistic for some of the development opportunities. Article 4, consider additional platting exemptions. What we touched on earlier, interpretations we've had through the years. Could there be consideration of an affordable housing exemption for platting? How would that work? How would that look? Also, Article 5, we also touched on, which is the reconsideration of the voluntary buyout amount for affordable housing to mimic policy 2.16.4, the Geller policy. So those are some of the considerations identified for that document. And here we are at the roadmap. So today we're here at the kickoff meeting, August 2024, in case no one's sure. Public outreach is really starting now. We have September, but public outreach is really starting. Our staff will be available if you have meetings that you'd like us to come to, roundtable discussions, whatever it may be. We'd love to, be there and participate and just, help share this information with your elected officials, with your residents, homeowners associations, realtor groups, voters groups, whatever you have. We're happy to make a much pared down presentation from this, obviously. Today is the kickoff, so I promise there will not be this much detail or information in a public meeting. The Planning Council's Executive Committee is also the steering committee for this process. And what they've asked our staff to do is set up a series of educational presentations, basically affordable housing, transportation, and redevelopment. So I've been working on identifying different professionals and people that we can invite for those educational pieces. So those meetings will be webcast also. We'll obviously send you out a constant contact, an email, whatever it may be to alert you to that. And then those will also be posted online. So we anticipate those being 90-minute kind of educational pieces. I'm just going to say Ralph Stone will probably be at one of them. And a series of, we'll invite a city, and we'll invite a developer, and we'll invite a land use attorney. And it'll kind of be everyone will have 15 to 20 minutes, educational part. And then the third meeting would be the steering committee having an actual policy discussion, taking the framework, how does this fit in, what can we do, what's proposed, how they're directing Planning Council staff to proceed and start drafting some of those documents. So that's how the steering committee will work. Public input starts now, right? It's never not here, but starting now officially, whatever comments you may have. So as we kind of get through, we're anticipating by next summer having a first Planning Council public hearing. And that we'll have those draft comments out. Maybe I reversed those. Maybe 5 and 6 are reversed, and I just got the numbers wrong when I was doing it. Documents will always be available for you to comment on. So ignore those numbers for a second. The Planning Council first public hearing would happen, and like I said, we're always encouraging public participation. Sometimes I know we over-notify, but we'll be letting everyone know. Give us your comments, be part of the process. At that point, it goes to the County Commission and transmitted to the state for the Chapter 163 review process, receive those comments back, take in any last-minute comments, and then hopefully will be adopted, the total update by March 2026, hopefully at the latest. So that's kind of our roadmap and timeline for that. I'm just looking at my notes to see if I missed anything in the process. I think that's pretty good. Let's keep in touch. Sign up for emails or text today. That's the constant contact. If you didn't get the constant contact email from me, I know some of them have been stuck in spam filters, quarantine, so just make sure that you check those. And this is the way you can sign up for that. It's also on our website, broward.org/BrowardNext. You can also go to the Planning Council website, and there's a link there to the BrowardNext page. It's where all the information will be posted for meeting dates, for content, for the framework that we're talking about today. You sign up for emails, sign up for SMS texting. Social media, we're working on. Social media, it's an interesting thing that we're finding is that there's really been an evolution of how much harder it can be. So we're thinking about just using the Broward Gov social media to push out meeting notifications for that. But we'll be working on that. And you can submit comments anytime. We don't have it set up right now on the website, but you can always email the Planning Council, planningcouncil@broward.org. You can email any of the staff members. All of our email addresses are on the Planning Council website. Email us anytime, call us anytime. We're always here for you. Sorry. So we're finally at questions, comments. Are there any? We have 2 microphones. If there's any questions, comments, ideas. Mayor Cooper, who is going to be right over with the microphone. Thank you. Just so people online can hear you too.
How are you doing? Good morning. First of all, thank you so much for all your great work and those of you that have contributed. It's interesting because, we have mantras as cities. It's not on. We have mantras as cities, especially like when we go to other agencies, you know, not every one size fits all. And obviously Hallandale Beach being one of the most densely populated cities in Broward County at over 40,000 people and 4.4 square miles, we have a totally different perspective sometimes than other communities. So bear with me and don't shoot me. You know, we have over 14 parks in our community. We're built out. We're not buying any more land. We're not buying acres of land for $8 million for parks. We just can't afford it. And you've made great strides in looking at, particularly when you're doing a mixed use, you know, high building, that all the amenities are incorporated and we're actually putting rooftop amenities. And I appreciate that you're really looking into it and the percentage offsets for park calculations. But I believe that there needs to be another look at it because those people, our residents, I should say, our residents that live there, I mean, we have a brand new building modeled like after New York, Slate. They have an indoor golf, animated golf course. They have a daycare. They have 2 spas. They have a dog park. They have a pool. They have racquetball. So everything they do as far as parks and rec, they don't even have to leave their property. So I'm just going to put that on record and thank you for the work that you've already brought forward. But I do want to put it on the radar. And I don't know how that fits because Western communities are going to be totally different than actual urban core communities. So thank you.
Thank
I
you.
didn't mean
Thanks
to be
for,
long-winded.
I think that that's a great comment because we obviously sent out the parks update to all the cities, but I think it continues on the framework, right, for consideration. There's nothing that's not on the table, right? Part of your point of we're different than Western cities, you can be different, right? It's what rules that and what you need to follow and what you need to do to make things appropriate for your residents. So I think it continues on the framework and we continue to consider it. Thank you. Just 1 second, sorry.
Oh, hi.
Yeah.
Okay, so Karen Friedman here with the Broward MPO. I had been sending some comments to some of our executive leadership. So I think there would be absolutely an opportunity for the Broward MPO to work with Planning Council in developing multimodal level service standards. There are some that have been developed by FDOT that maybe could be appropriate. A couple other comments, I think maybe considering separated share use paths, even within FDOT-owned or county-owned right-of-way for parks and open space consideration. Those are certainly, we encourage the cities that we work with at the MPO to think of them as extensions of their recreation facilities.
Can I ask you a question just for
Sure.
a second? So
Yeah.
do you mean like a bike lane or pedestrian pathway?
I would say more the separated shared use paths, but that could be part of an ongoing conversation of what should be counted.
Okay.
But that could also give more parks and open space to the cities when they're using their calculations. So that would be another
Okay.
suggestion. Also, certainly the focus at the Broward MPO is not just about multimodal transportation, but safe transportation. And I think that that's something that we're really focused on through our planning efforts. So I would just put that out there. But certainly, I think this will be the first of many conversations that we have and want to work with you all.
Super, thanks. And I love the separated shared use path part because I think that just goes to Mayor Cooper's point of, what can we consider that kind of goes outside the traditional standards for that. Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Huda, we have a question right here. This gentleman. Thank you.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi.
Roderick Newkirk. I also do community outreach work. And I'm on the Housing Advisory Committee of the City of Fort Lauderdale. Then plus also another thing too is when the developers when they're developing these projects, it was $4,500 somewhere up in there, but now it's $10,000. And what happens is with some of these affordable housing units, it's an opt-out plan that they have. So now it's a $10,000 opt-out plan. So they can say that they're building affordable housing, and then they can say that they're starting off building, and they say, hey, you know what? I'll just pay this $10,000 opt-out plan, and now it's not affordable housing anymore. So what is the county doing about that, or how is the county coexisting with the other local government agencies on that end? And then plus also another problem is even when the affordable housing is being built up, you have people in the communities that have been living in communities all their lives. They're not getting the affordable housing. You have other ethnic groups coming in, getting the affordable housing. So what is being done about that? And then plus also so the information can get out to the inner cities, because they need affordable housing. You know, we all need affordable housing over there, and then plus also subsidized housing also too. So how is that getting out? Because I know it's people that very upset about that. You know, when you get brand new affordable housing, like right over there on Andrews, you have some senior buildings that was built up, and then some new affordable housing units that was built up, but no one from the community got a unit. You got other ethnic groups coming in, getting the affordable housing, and you have people here that's been here all their lives, and they're not getting it. So what is being done about that, and how can we work together to solve that issue?
Thank you. So this is how my notes are summarizing. You don't like in lieu of fees, right? Like consideration, you would prefer actual affordable housing product to a buyout. Do you think that's?
Right, because you have some of the, start off building affordable housing, and say, well, we have so many units, or we don't have so many units, now all of a sudden, through the project, they say, well, you know what, I'm gonna opt out, pay the $10,000 opt-out fee.
Right.
It's
Okay.
no longer affordable housing.
Okay, and then also,
And also, too, aren't they also getting federal money to build those projects? When they are they getting federal money to build those projects also too, when they say that they're doing it for affordable housing? Is that going on also as well?
that it's federal, I don't really know the answer to the funding mechanism. I don't believe that it's usually federal funding, but I have your information for the framework for the consideration. And how do you ensure that area residents qualify or are able to access the affordable housing opportunities? Thank you. Do you have any more questions in the room or comments before we go to the online chat? Are there any questions on the online chat? No. There are no questions on the online chat. Any more questions in the room? Here we go. Thank you. Yeah, we have 5 minutes until we need to take a break, so they can just switch over. So we're great.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Jay Spock. I'm a affordable housing property manager. And I would like to ask about the conversion. That's a big thing that's going on across the country, where they take office buildings that are struggling or hotel properties, motels. Is there any thing with that you could elaborate on?
So you mean the conversion into residential?
Yeah.
Well,
or
sure.
Any plans?
I'm sorry?
Any incentives or programs for that?
Yeah, I think policy 2.16.4 that we talked about along qualifying arterial roadways would certainly be in the direction that you're speaking of. And that would underutilized land for old shopping centers, old office buildings that are no longer. I can't really speak to the conversion of the actual structure to residential, but there's certainly opportunities within the county land use plan that I think would work today, and that we could continue to consider those kinds of opportunities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, any more questions in the audience? Rick Buckeye, Huda. Hang on one second, just wait for the microphone, please. Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
I don't know if it was mentioned. I was just curious if there was going to be any policies relative to the Live Local legislation that we've been studying.
Yeah, so I mean, really for the county plan, that's really authorized at the local government, right? The county plan doesn't control that. I'm reluctant, I actually was just talking about this morning in the office. I'm reluctant to put that in the county plan because we don't implement, one, and two, we have 9 years left on the legislation. So I think it's a tool for local governments. We're here to assist you, but I don't think that, it doesn't mean that it won't happen, but I don't think it's, it's on my radar, but I don't think it's really for the county plan. But I can add it, I would certainly add it to the list because I think it's worthy of the discussion.
Well, appreciate it. One other question. I know our comprehensive plan is a little bit more restrictive maybe than BrowardNext in relation to the density allocation under Commerce. Ours does require that we allocate flex and reserve units, and I don't know if we were to consider amending the plan to allow the density in non-residential or commerce, that could be something we could consider.
Well, sure. Well, there's two different pieces here. There's 216.4, which is residential by right, and then there's the commerce designation in the county plan that we do require still flexibility units. It's just two different tools.
Okay.
So that's a separate tool. That does require flexibility or redevelopment units. If you're just have a commercial or commerce property, you do still have to
Still
do that.
need
If
to
you're
do
not
that.
qualifying for 216.4, you still have to
Okay.
do that. But I think that's a consideration, right? That's something, that's
Yes.
exactly like on point. Should we expand that permitted use? And then we get into some things where it's
Okay.
maybe in competition with it, but we'll figure it out.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. With that, I am actually going to conclude this meeting, and we will go on a short break so that the AV folks can switch us over to the next meeting if you're staying for the 10:30 Affordable Housing Workshop. So if you're online, we'll be back on at 10:30. So please feel free to leave or take a restroom break. Thank you. before you start, because it gives them time to switch over.
Barbara says I have to count to 5. I don't know why. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are we ready? Okay. Good morning, everybody. You will all recall, if you've been here a minute, that in March, the Board of County Commissioners accepted Dr. Murray's 10-year Affordable Housing Master Plan, and that was the culmination of about a year's worth of work in 60 stakeholders meetings. And I know we talked to many of you, including elected officials, professional staffs, all of the industry sectors in the county, and it's heartening, but it's sad that everyone rated affordable housing by far as the #1 priority. And we now know that affordable housing is no longer a social issue. It is the #1 priority for the business community, and I think the future health of Broward County. We have a lot of challenges in the county in terms of catching up and making affordable housing happen. And as planners and all of you that are elected officials in the private sector and the development business know, we're out of dirt, and so that's a problem. And the locations that we have are expensive and mainly in higher density areas, so frequently we're looking at mid-rise and high-rise, and so you have to layer in structured parking, and there's just another cost to make the deal work. So as you've heard me say for many years, affordable housing is a real estate deal with a subsidy. That has not changed, and it really doesn't matter what the strategy is, that holds true. And unfortunately, and I don't use this slide anymore because it's really not a happy slide, but if I was going to start, I would say we're still number last. But I've kind of narrowed down my general characterization of where we're at in Broward County for affordable housing in 2 ways. One, in terms of what people can afford to buy, actually a home to live in. We've been as high recently this summer with the median home price around $635,000. I think when Dr. Murray presented his plan in March, it was like $540 or something like that. It just continues to rise. It's amazing. At that level, only 5% of the families in Broward County can afford the median priced home. And at $600,000, the way that computes with 30% of your wages dedicated to housing, anything above that you're considered cost burden. So you need an income of between $180,000 and $200,000 to buy the median priced home. And as a friend of mine who had a $500,000 budget told me and has been looking for a year, yeah, that's in a neighborhood you don't want to be in with burglar bars and a carport. So it's not only that we have that monetary challenge, we have a supply here that's older. Broward County is one of the oldest metro areas in the state of Florida, and it's starting to show. So that's one out of 2 challenges in affordable housing, and the other is the rental market. And in terms of the rental market, it's really no better. We are in terms of proportion, the most cost burdened metro area in the United States. That means we have high housing costs and we have low wages. And people go, oh, what about San Francisco and Honolulu and New York? Well, they have really, really high housing costs, but they have really, really high wages. So their gaps between the two aren't as bad as it is here. So in terms of people looking to rent, I kind of use what Florida Housing Finance Corporation uses for their programmatic planning, and that is the demographics from the Schimberg Center up at the University of Florida. And persistently, year after year, Broward County is last in the state, in all 67 counties, of the number of units available for families earning 60% or less of area median income. That's about a $40,000 a year salary. And it just so happens, and we'll talk about it in a few minutes, that 1 out of 2 employees in Broward County is exactly that cohort. They earn 60% of area median income or less. So, we'll see from one of the slides that the average rent in Broward County is $2,800. In some of the cities, it's over $3,000. And you just do the multiple times 3 of what you need as an income to rent in Broward County. And what it is $80,000 to $100,000 for the average 2-bedroom rent in Broward County. People don't think about that as being affordable housing or a wage that has a level that makes your standard of living a challenge. And the other thing that we don't spend a lot of time talking about is in the industry is there's an index called H+T, housing plus transportation cost. And nationally, the standard, like your housing cost should be 30% of your income, your transportation cost should be 15% of your income. So 45% of your wage should go to housing and transportation. In Broward, it's persistently around 70%. That's staggering, and if you've spent any time looking at what the United Way has done with their studies, and Sandra, remind me what the acronym is for the United Way? The ALICE report. And it really is a benchmark that benchmarks Broward County in terms of what a family needs to live here, and it looks at many more indicators other than housing and transportation. But the tick away from poverty in Broward County is being experienced by hundreds of thousands of people. So at any rate, the board adopted this plan in March, and the plan was not a mandate in regard to any of the cities, and that's something that the board wanted to make clear. But the subtitle of the plan, which is Leading the Challenge and Sharing the Burden, was clearly an indicator that the board was not stepping back from the commitments that they had been making, but they were clearly looking for partners to step up to the challenge, particularly the cities and particularly the private sector. And most of the slides I'm going to share with you, you've all seen before, which is a breakdown of what the demand is by city for the number of units that they need to service their ownership needs, but more importantly, and I'm not going to spend hardly any time on that, what they need in terms of the deficiency in rental housing. But the board did do 2 things as far as the county is concerned. One is they made a continuing commitment to fund gap financing. In 2018, the most general fund dollars I had ever gotten a year was $275,000. In 2018, the board dedicated $5 million for gap financing. We leveraged that into a 100-unit project with Cornerstone. And since that time, the board has allocated $130 million, and we've done 3,000 units. Fortunately, I guess it is fortunately, the source of that funding is expiring tax increments. So we have 13 CRAs in the county that have tax increment, and they all will finally expire after 30 years this decade. A couple have already expired, so we're doing $9 million a year. The board adopted a policy in March that 90% of the expired tax increment dollars to the county would be dedicated to affordable housing, and we would revisit that allocation every fiscal year. So this year coming up, that's about $9 million, but the board last year supplemented that to the tune of another $11 million to make it $20 million. And this year in the budget, we've got between $20 and $25 million. And the reason we pressed the board to reach that $20 million level is because we have the benefit in Broward of having a housing finance authority that gets $100 million a year of bond allocation from the federal treasury to the state of Florida back to Broward County. So it's not free dollars, because those are tax dollars, but there are dollars that we don't have to generate through our real estate taxes. So With $20 million, we can fully absorb that $100 million of allocation, and we can do 2 to 3 deals a year. So we're talking, around 500 units. And I'll go back to affordable housing is a real estate deal with a subsidy. It absolutely is. It's expensive. And to just give you a quick insight on kind of the model, when we put our RFAs for this gap financing, our benchmark has generally been a $50,000 per unit subsidy, even though the industry tells us that's too low. And we have funded projects that had $90,000 per unit subsidy. Expensive land cost, high-rise construction, and structured parking. So, they get scored, they're competitive, but over the course of the 6 years, we've come in, excuse me, at an average about $46,000 per unit. But here's the magic in what sounds like an overwhelmingly expensive proposition. We, first of all, I call it a slow-rolling revolving loan fund. We do a 30-year zero-interest loan that we get paid back at the end of the term, or when the project is refinanced or there's a transfer of the ownership. We started out with a 30-year affordability period because we wanted to be competitive, and we are competitive, by the way, with the state of Florida. They have bond funds that they can dedicate toward projects. And then a couple of years ago, we bumped that to 50 years. And so when I was talking with the board in thinking about the amount of funding that has to go toward making these units happen, if you do the math and you take that $50,000 a unit over a 50-year period, it works out to $2.78 a day for an affordable unit. So I said to the board candidly, who of you would not take that deal? If I came to you and said, I can give you an affordable housing unit for $2.78 a day for 50 years, would you do that? And I went, well, of course we would. Well, recently, because we're crafty people and we push just like the private sector pushes, we gave bonus points in our last RFA for deals that we defined it as commit the project in perpetuity, which we defined as 99 years or more. The board approved about 4 or 5 weeks ago, five or six deals. Where's Lisa? Was it 6 deals? 5 deals, and how many of them had the 99 year? All but one committed to a 99-year affordability period. Well, you do the math on that, you get that unit for $1.70 a day for 100 years. So then the business model starts to make sense. So the reason I'm going through this is because particularly all of you at the local level, the board is looking for you to become more engaged, and if you're not, to step up in the first place. And it's just to show that there are ways to get at this problem. And I should comment that many of the cities are at the table and doing good, hard work. Fort Lauderdale, Hallandale, Hollywood, Pompano, Oakland Park, Wilton Manors, they all are doing, I think, the most that they can at a point in time to get in the game. We give a bonus of 5 points for any project that brings $1 million from the city that they're located in. We had a deal, where's Adam? See, I don't know if he's still here. There's Adam. We had a Fort Lauderdale deal that got 25 points because they got $5 million from the city. And that popped them right up to being ranked number 1. So we look for these opportunities in terms of funding and how we can convert them into leverage. I think one of the gentlemen talked about the payment in lieu of, and I don't want to get too long-winded on the funding end of this, but by example, the advantage of doing a payment in lieu of, even though it doesn't pay for the full price of a unit, which is about $350,000, is that it goes into our trust fund or the city's trust fund. We share the amount if the city wants their share. And that's what becomes that 50,000 per unit. So if you're thinking in terms of the total unit cost, for the $50,000 a unit, we're getting a $300,000 to $350,000 asset. And we're also leveraging, going back to the HFA bonds. So we kick in that 1/6 of the deal with the 50,000. The HFA kicks into, another 3 to 4/5 of the deal with their bond allocation on a 100-unit deal. That's probably going to be $25 to $30 million. And then the private side has to come in with the other 1/6 or 1/3 of the equity. And that's not easy, by the way. These deals are expensive because, reflecting back to the affordability period, that means that whoever is running and managing and refreshing and maintaining these deals have to do it for that period of time, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years. And the subsidies have to be deep enough so that the level of revenue that they're getting from their tenants, which can't be more than 30%, based on the income cohort. And in some of these deals, by the way, the tax credit deals, the income cohorts are 60 and 30%. The most vulnerable, the hardest to find, the most expensive to do, but that's how the sausage is made to make these deals work. So one of the two things the board did was commit to that source of funding. So it's worked out for us, politically. That's a big step to take, but we're encouraging all of the other cities to look to their opportunities to do the same thing. One last comment in terms of the expired tax increment. So here's an opportunity. Those 13 CRAs, they're getting, in effect, a windfall on their side of the tax increment when the CRA expires, just like we did. So they can use that funding to dedicate to affordable housing, or have to dedicate to affordable housing, whatever they want to do. So it's just an opportunity to kind of get there. And there are dozens of ways to get at this, some large and expensive and hard, others small. A unit in the bucket is a good unit, and we have plenty of units we need to add to the bucket. The other thing that the board did was they, and this kind of fits right into the BrowardNext, and that's kind of really the only reason I'm here this morning, is talking with Joe and Barbara about BrowardNext, is the board, at Dr. Murray's recommendation, initiated an effort called densification, which is basically looking at the areas of the county that can have the development potential boosted up, not only for affordable housing, but for market rate inventory. We have as much a challenge in this county to bring market rates units to the table as we do affordable housing. And as Barbara mentioned, if we've got a future population of 600 and something thousand, you divide that by 2 or 2.5, you're looking at what, another couple of 100,000 units? Where are they going to go? Well, they're going to go on the old commercial corridors, the old big box store sites, and the old shopping center sites. And the only thing good about that is we've got that stuff out the wazoo. We've got commercial corridors, north, south, Dixie, commercial, Broward, and we've got rail corridors that are prime for redevelopment that will bring to us, I think, the opportunity and the appropriateness to do higher density residential. So we have started talking with Joe and Barbara about doing just that, and I think that'll blend right into the work that y'all are going to be doing on BrowardNext. I'm not going to spend any more time on this slide, just to advance it. And here are some of the numbers on each individual city's deficiency in terms of home ownership. And I admit that home ownership is not a priority for me, because that's not where the real need is. And I think even though it's a high market bar, I think it's really the business of the private sector more than local government to make home ownership work. Although there are 15 entitlement cities in Broward County, including the county, that's 16, that get home and block grant, the 2 federal grants, and SHIP, which is a state grant. And almost, well, all of the strategies, all 16 of those entities' strategies include a purchase assistance program. So there are about 500 to 800 units that are created for affordable buyers at the low-income cohorts. That's a good thing. You know, we value the neighborhoods, and the other half of that money is going into existing affordable owners that need home repair assistance. So we get into the neighborhoods and we do value home ownership. So I'll scroll through these on the home sales. You know, I already touched on this. But we get into the Broward County rental deficiencies. You can see that there's a total of about 74,000 units in terms of deficiency. These are ranked by the number of units. You know, this is not a good guy or a bad guy, and as you might imagine, Fort Lauderdale and Hollywood are there because they're the biggest cities by population, so you expected them to have the biggest need. But it's interesting, if you look at the Broward County totals at the top, the $2,800 per month average rent I mentioned for a two-bedroom, and the median income and the monthly affordability gap of about $1,400. If you take that income, you multiply it by 30, you divide it by 12, and you take that figure and you subtract it from $2,800, you get exactly $1,414. It's as easy as that to figure out how the demand works. So in your own communities, you could have done that as easily as Dr. Murray did, but he did it for you. So you can see by city what the needs are. And by the way, I don't think that 7,000 or 6,000 or 3,000 or 2,000 units is not a goal that is unachievable. You know, we talk about, oh my God, it's 75,000 units, it's $50,000 a unit to make the unit happen. That's too many numbers, I'm not even going to talk about it. But once you start taking the bites out of it, and you do that over a 10-year horizon, this boat can slow down and turn around, and I think that's where we are now. I think we've stopped it a little bit with what the board has been doing in many of the cities, and the future is having the cities in conjunction with all the partners, us, excuse me, and the private sector, figure out how we develop strategies and funding options to bite into these demands. And by the way, the private sector is at it at the same time we are. I know that there's at least 2 major employers who are looking at doing employee-assisted housing. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. You know, I say, okay, how did we get here? Let me go off a little quick, a different path. We got here because for 40 years, maybe even 50 years, wages adjusted for inflation in the United States are dead flat. And the glide path for the housing cost adjusted for inflation is 45 degrees. So there's the problem. And it's not going away, it's expanding. So the flip side of our challenge is wages. And I believe that in every HR department, regardless of size, and that's out there in this county, they're all working on how they retain and recruit employees. I have that challenge and have lost employees making $80,000 a year that left after moving here from outside of Florida and went back because they couldn't afford the house. That's a persistent problem. And the only reason I mention that is because as we try and fund our way out of the affordable housing problem, the private sector's got to step up, and part of the way they do that is dealing with the whole wage issue. There are other ways that they can participate, but that's a big one. So, let me go see if I can go back real quick. I didn't want to step away from this one too quick. So I mentioned earlier that 1 out of 2 employees in Broward County earn 60% of area median income or less. And the left side of the table is the top 10 industry sectors in Broward County. And out of that top 10, you can see there's only one that's not in that $40,000 a year, 60% area median income cohort, and that's the third one down, professional scientific, which is an average or median income of $62,000. Look at the rest of these median incomes: 40, 27, 22, 44, 37, 29, 42, 26, 49. Those people cannot afford a two-bedroom home in Broward County. They're not even close. And that's when you reflect back over to the slides that we had previously, what those, how much additional money they had to make up that gap to become an affordable renter, and it's staggering. I did the math on the number of units a while back, and I can't remember what it is, but I think this is like well over 600,000 employees. That's a hell of a lot of people making that income. And then over on the left side, you can see by occupational categories. The only other thing I'll mention, going back to the projects that are delivered by the gap financing and the bond funds that I mentioned. A couple of years ago, I was at a conference up in Orlando, and I met an Orange County commissioner. We were talking about this. She said, "You know what I did? I asked my affordable developer community to survey who their tenants were employed by." So we did the same thing. I picked a half a dozen of ours, and it turns out they're nurses, they're entry-level cops and firemen, they're stewardesses, these are professional level positions in addition to what we know all of these employees represent is our service economy, which is what our economy is built on, what it will continue to be built on. By the way, as Dr. Murray, I don't have it in this slide, took a look at the future employment in Broward County. It's like 8 out of 10 of the jobs in the future. That 200,000 I mentioned, it's kind of a proportion of the 600 unit demand, or the 600,000 population, are going to be service employees. So this will continue to be a challenge. We talked about the densification. These are all recommendations right out of the 10-year plan. It's online. You can see it. You probably have. These are Dr. Murray's recommendations. And I know as planners, you're all very familiar with these. And many of you are already doing these. This is the map that Dr. Murray put together in regard to the locations where there are opportunities for future redevelopment, the major commercial corridors, the big box stores, the rail lines, and all of the old shopping centers. The bad news, there's a whole lot of it. The good news is there's a whole lot of it. So I think absent these opportunities, the ability to finance future development, whether it's market rate or affordable, would almost be unattainable. And there are unattainable markets in the United States where they've had to do extreme things. I was just reading an article this morning about Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, et cetera, which are extremely expensive communities in Massachusetts that now the state has demanded that local government take care of the needs, or the housing needs, the affordable housing needs for the workforce there. So just like we had live local kind of imposed on us by the legislature, and they preempted local government in terms of density and height, that's kind of a lifeline that has to be thrown because you're not getting there. So there are areas of the country that San Francisco, for example, that faced housing costs that were so extreme, it imploded the San Francisco economy. And what I keep saying is in 10 years, we don't want to be San Francisco, we don't want to be California. So we have to all get at this. The final thing that the board did and that Dr. Murray recommended and that Joe is going to help us through the Housing Council is there's going to be an annual scorecard or dashboard for all of the cities in the county that takes those deficiencies and aligns them with policies and funding and kind of defines, okay, this year, how many units did you get done? How much funding did you allocate? What kind of policy did you put in place? What have you done to advance the affordable housing challenge? Doesn't have to always be dollars. It can be policy initiatives that can be of a lot of assistance. So fortunately, those 15 entitlement cities, last comment and I'll take questions, make up about 85% of the land area and about 85% of the population in Broward. So we know that all of those cities are doing stuff, at least with their grant funds. So they'll be able to start to fill in some of these cells with their grant stuff. But there'll be other initiatives, like Adam's working on in Fort Lauderdale and that I see all the time, that will start to fill this in and we'll share that and everyone can kind of see what's going on and hopefully there'll be some economies of scale that we can come up with ideas that will help the initiative. And that's kind of what it'll look like. I know that Joe will do a better job addressing it up than I have here. That's all I had to share with you today. I know many of y'all have heard this before, but it is, the time is here that everyone get in the game, and that's the expectation on the board's part. The board has not backed off at all, but I think honestly the board is at a point, particularly in terms of budget and funding initiatives, that they're about where they can go, and have been more than fair in funding the programs. We do know, though, at the end of the decade, when the expired TIF, our share of it will reach $70 million. We will have doubled what we need to absorb that bond allocation, and we'll be able to get into other strategies, into the neighborhoods, do more, if the board wants to, individual housing, small projects, gap financing, et cetera. So I look forward to that and look forward to all y'all's help. So Barbara, are you taking questions or do I need to?
It might be better if we go through the presentation.
Works for me. Okay, thank you all.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Jo Sosodier, and I'm the Director of Urban Planning over at Broward County. I don't want to take you away from questions for Ralph, so please hold on to any questions that you have for him, because we will have an opportunity to do questions and answers for all the components of this session. So I'm here to talk about population growth and about the population forecasting allocation model, which is a huge mouthful and therefore is affectionately known as PFAM. And it is a process that we have gone through over the last couple of years to basically allocate population growth in the county and to get a really good understanding of how that population is going to grow in the future and how that impacts things like our land use planning. So it ties in with what we've been talking about today with housing growth, with the need for market rate housing, with the need for land use changes, and with the looking to the future about how we accommodate affordable housing. So that's what I'm going to try to cover briefly this morning. So let's talk about what the allocation model is. And it's basically a 5-step program that we went through, starting with taking the population data from the state and looking at trend analysis, allocating those units by traffic analysis zone, working with our municipal partners to calibrate the model, and then basically we will have a publication that I anticipate is going to be out by next month. So I'm giving you a little bit of a preview of some of the materials that we'll have available shortly. So our population is going to grow. Barbara had showed you a diagram earlier that showed a 650,000 increase. That was from 2000. But what we're seeing now is currently 1.9 million people living in Broward County, and our future expectation by 2050 is there'll be 2.4 million people. So think about that for a second. That is, essentially a 15% growth over the 30-year time period. And we anticipate that we need to accommodate all of those residents. Now, these numbers are not numbers that the county came up with. These are the numbers that are generated by the state and that are calculated for all of the counties in the state of Florida. So this is the BEBA numbers from the University of Florida. When we took these numbers, we looked at trend analysis. We looked at what's been happening with census data analysis for a number of factors, including how our population is aging, the differences in the different generations, how does the aging of the baby boomers impact our household size versus the millennial generation, what is the age of which people are forming households, new households, and then we looked at things like vacancy rates and seasonal rates, which also affect how many units are available. So basically, the population allocation model takes the number of people that are being generated by the state, and we convert that into households and subsequently into units. And that's how it ties into the land use planning, because it all comes down to how many units are we providing for the future population. So as you can see here, I just picked out a couple of the interesting age groups, and you can see the red line here is the retirement population, the folks who are aged over 60, the baby boomers, who currently make up a significant portion of our population, but tomorrow will make up an even larger cohort. And we see the number of retirees increasing through 2050. That is basically the silver tsunami. That's what we've been talking about coming for a long time. And if anyone's heard Mayor Rich give conversations about this, you will hear her use that term many times. The increase in retirees and the effects of that for public policy. We see new households, we see peak earners, those are the folks in their 40s and 50s, and then we see the increase in school-age population, all of which are much more gradual over this time period. The other thing we looked at is household size by the age of householder. And no real surprise here that the 3, 4, and 5-person households tend to be predominantly headed by people who are 35, 45, because those are the age groups at which you tend to have families with children. What's interesting is how many 1- and 2-person households there are, and how that number also increases significantly as people age. So the older groups, we have a lot of 1- and 2-person households. And the household size impacts the number of units that we need. So that's sort of the correlation there between the population, the households, and the units. So the next stage in the process of this modeling was to allocate those populations to the traffic analysis zones, of which we have 973 in Broward County, and that's an awful lot to do. So we took the number of dwelling units, we looked at the constraints with vacant land, we looked at the Broward County land use plan and the different residential allocations and the capacity that's available in the plan, and tried to allocate people to those areas. Now, as we've talked about earlier today, Broward County is, from a practical standpoint, built out. We have 12 square miles of vacant developable land right now. 12 square miles. That's about 2.8% of the Broward County land. And of that, less than 5 square miles is designated for residential development. So essentially, if you don't see a lot on this map, it's not because I have a poor graphic, it's because there really isn't anything to show. We really don't have a lot of vacant land. So now we're looking at areas where the density bonuses are available, and these are the things that Barbara talked about being in the land use plan. They are the activity centers, they are the commercial lands along arterial roads, and there are some opportunities in community facility land. There's also the railroad areas as well, which were actually included on the map, but they're not in the key. So these are areas where there are increased opportunities for residential density and for future development. And so we tried to tie in our population modeling units to these areas. We put together an initial calibration of the model and sent that out to the cities to identify growth areas and redevelopment areas. So we had a lot of outreach with our community partners, and I really want to thank everybody that was part of this. I know a lot of city planners took a lot of time out to meet with our staff and to sit down and go through their redevelopment plans and their vision for where they saw future development, often outside of the currently approved land use plan. So really appreciate your input on that long-term growth. We put this together, we'd gone through a preliminary review, we sent out a little survey to everyone, asked them did they think that these numbers looked consistent with where they saw the city was going. We got more feedback, and we went through that iteration of recalibrating the model, which is now fortunately complete. So thank you for all your assistance with that. The publication is going to come out next month. That'll be a number of different things that are placed on our demographics hub. This is the QR code that takes you to the demographics hub. We're going to provide you with the input tables and with a dashboard and with the data that we use for the individual TAZs. So if you are with a city, you will get the breakdown within your own city, not just the municipal total, but you'll be able to get that breakdown within the city. And all of this will be in a downloadable format. So you'll see a dashboard for each city. It'll give you some numbers, some overviews, some graphics. If you are with the City of Plantation, this is actually just a demo, so please don't take this as your graphic. But we will be providing this to you in that format, and it'll be a very user-friendly kind of interface to provide the data. So let me talk just a little bit about the findings. We have, based on looking at the population growth that I was just talking about, we've identified that we need 218,000 additional units by 2050. So that's a significant growth in the number of units. And that's because we see the aging single baby boomers, we see the smaller household size, which you see in this graphic here. Our household sizes are generally declining and have been for some time. We have the smaller Gen X cohort, and we have more of the millennials. And of course, the millennials through 2050 will be aging, just as all of us are aging, of course. And then we also looked at, seasonal and vacant units, short-term rentals, and the kind of impact that that has on taking away units that would otherwise be available for permanent use, permanent residence. So all of this population pressure is really impacting future land use. If you look at the Broward County Land Use Plan, and this is the form that you see it in all the time, we're all very familiar with this. What does not jump out at you is how the irregular land use areas are predominantly lower density. So we looked at this and we split the irregular residential areas into those above and below 5 units per acre. And when you do that, you discover that 49% of our land use is actually single family, essentially, low 5 and below. Irregular land uses of 3.4 or 2.1 or whatever. So we really do have a problem for missing middle housing because we really do have this predominant land use of single family, which I think Barbara mentioned before, although we all know now that conservation is the biggest land use. The problem, perhaps, is the low density residential. So we looked at the distribution of units, and this is essentially the end product of the PFAM modeling. This is the 2020 to 2050 growth by traffic analysis zone. And so those 900 plus zones, we're showing the number of new units. And with the exception of the very, very north part of the county, which is basically a single family area that has developed in the last 3 to 4 years, pretty much all of the rest of the growth corresponds with the growth areas that are identified in the land use plan. You can particularly pick out the activity centers, and you can see some of the development that corresponds with the commerce areas. So we tried to follow as much as we could those areas in allocating that future population. So again, just to summarize, we only have 4.5 square miles of vacant land. That's not going to produce more than about 30,000 units. We need to look at redevelopment because that is where new units are going to come from. And that really ties into the land use planning we've been talking about, because there is a shortfall in the capacity of the existing land use plan, even when we talk about density bonuses, and even when we talk about Live Local Act, which someone mentioned earlier, that allows you to put residential in commercial and industrial areas. Even with all of these things, we really have a need for more densification. And the one other thing that came up in our discussions with the cities, especially those that are in the east and have parts of the Barrier Island, was the long-term impacts of climate change, which might actually reduce the number of units that we have. And so that's not something that we modeled, but it is something I think we need to put out there to think about in the context of long-range planning and, you know, the changes that we're talking about in BrowardNext. So with that, I just want to give you this QR code again in case you didn't get it. This is the one for our demographics web hub, where the publication, the materials will be available. I don't know if you want to do questions now or if you want to keep going, so I will bring Barbara back up. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Before I get started, if anyone wasn't here for the first meeting, I'm Barbara Blake-Boy. I'm the Executive Director of the Broward County Planning Council, so thanks for joining us. But before I get started on the slides, I just want to recognize a couple of members of the audience. Commissioner Rogers came in as we were starting the affordable housing part of the presentation, County Commissioner for District 9, right? So, and then also we have Commissioner Gruber here from the City of Hollywood, who's been here the entire time. Sorry. And I don't know if there's any other elected officials that I don't know. So if you are, please just let me know, and thank you. Thanks. Okay, so like I said, I'm Barbara Boy. I'm the Executive Director of the Planning Council. Some of this is going to be a repeat. My slides aren't as pretty for this part of the presentation because I just want to go through some of the a little bit meatier parts of the incentive-based policies that exist in the Broward County Land Use Plan, and that we'll be reconsidering for densification purposes and as part of BrowardNext. And I do want to mention that I will be stealing Joe's slides, because those are really great. So I'll be incorporating those, I'm sure, into our presentations too. So the first policy that I want to touch on, 2.16.3, bonus density policy. So like we talked about earlier, 6 units for every moderate income, which is up to 120%, that's 81 to 120%. Low income, which is 51% to 80%, 9 bonus units for every affordable unit, and very low, which is up to 50%, which is 19 bonus units for every restricted units. And when we're talking about as restricted units, we're talking about at least 30 years, right? So Ralph weighed in on some of the extended time periods, but in the county land use plan, to qualify for these, it is a minimum of 30 years. And I think that's probably something that will be examined as part of BrowardNext, but that's what the current rate is, and we would certainly look for more input on that. Residential bonus density is limited to 50 dwelling units per acre. We also touched on this earlier. Maybe it's time to examine a permission of a higher density for the residential land use as you have access to transportation. So that would certainly be a consideration. Unlimited densities for commerce and activity centers, only limited by bulk and form in the city codes and the city zoning. Residential by right and policy 216.4. This is the commerce category and activity center, commerce along arterials, 6.9.19. So we've adopted the same bonus densities for this. Unlimited density, only by bulk and form at the city. No allocation of flexibility or redevelopment units required if you are using the qualifying language of 216.4. As I mentioned, direct access to state roads, county arterials, or as approved by the county commission. An example of as approved by the county commission, I would use unincorporated Broward County. I think they added 27th Avenue to the map. They took a commission agenda item. The city of Pompano Beach added portions of Dixie Highway that weren't qualifying. So we have seen a couple of additions to that map. Again, unlimited density, no allocation of flexibility or redevelopment units required. Lands that are designated commerce and within 1/2 mile of a passenger rail station. This is an update to the county plan that will hopefully be approved by the county commission at their September 5th public hearing. And I do have, again, unlimited density and no allocation of flexibility or redevelopment units required. I want to just keep saying those messages because we do get those inquiries also. Designated activity center in the Broward County land use plan, unlimited density. No allocation of flex or redevelopment units required. That, for activity centers, that would also mean that you would almost be able to use very few units from the activity center pool if you're doing a highly affordable project. So we've helped some cities kind of work that math within the limitations of the plan also. So that's also a benefit for activity centers where they're using activity center units kind of as their foundation there, but they have to use far fewer when there's an affordable housing component. Comparison, this is just a map comparison. Ralph touched on the map provided for densification purposes as part of the 10-year Affordable Housing Master Plan. Here you see it. And what you will see when you compare it to this 216.4, they're very similar. You're going to see, these are the areas. And I think this goes along with Joe's message of where we have seen the additional units is primarily along these corridors and in these areas. So to me, that certainly signals that we're looking in the right places when we're proposing densification measures. This is just some graphics pulled from the commerce within a 1/2 mile of passenger rail stations. The only one I didn't include was the Bright Line station because while that's the policy is applicable, it's a majority of activity center already, so there was very little commercial or commerce property there. But this is just kind of a look at it. We have all of these things posted to our website too. If anyone's not familiar with the graphics, it's all available there. A couple more of the incentive policies that we need to touch on. The addition of community use, that's residential by right. You know what I'm going to say? Density limited to 50 dwelling units per acre. Perhaps we need to consider a higher level of that. No allocation of flexibility or redevelopment units required. This goes for properties that are owned by local governments within their jurisdictional boundaries, owned by the county or the school board. So this is, to me, the first kind of layer and a policy that could certainly be considered for expansion, but is in the plan. The next slide is a map, and this is just a generalized map. It is not for, it's just really for planning purposes because every parcel has to qualify by what's identified there, but it's what we, identified as a municipal, county, or school board-owned parcel. And it is for west of US 1 Federal Highway. So basically, it's west of the evacuation area that we would be encouraging those opportunities. A couple more incentives that are in the plan, density calculations. These are the units that are less than 500 square feet, counting them as 0.5 of a dwelling unit. Certainly a benefit if a local government wants to use that. And then also in the permitted section, uses section, accessory dwelling units, which are obviously, they're actually statutorily permitted, and we adopted it into the county plan. And they are subject to an affordable housing affidavit. So not a deed restriction, but an affidavit confirming that, which I've heard from a few cities is very difficult to manage. But just letting you know that that is an incentive that is adopted into the county plan. I think that concludes all of my slides. I don't have. No allocation of flex, sorry, for either one of these, for the density calculation or the accessory dwelling units, no allocation of flexibility or redevelopment units required. So I think that's part of the incentive, and as we move forward in identifying additional incentives is how do we allow things by right, and how do we do it appropriately, and how do we qualify things appropriately. And I think that those go back to the map, and we'll be examining that and continuing to examine it as part of BrowardNext. One thing that I did want to mention about these incentives, and as we identify additional opportunities in the Broward County Land Use Plan, I don't think that the Planning Council or the County Commission we're not waiting until the end of Broward Next to adopt, especially for affordable housing and density. So those are always going to be ongoing. So I think you can always anticipate things coming forward on that. So, there's things that can wait because they're cleanup and they're technical and there's those sorts of things. But I think any of these incentives that promote densification, we've always tried to fast track, and keep the process moving with those. With that, I will wrap it up for the presentation, and now we're ready for questions and comments. And I'm going to bring Ralph back up because I feel like he's going to be the most popular because you've already been talking to me. So we'll bring Ralph back up to start with the questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and Huda or Alicia will bring you the microphone. Alicia, if you can get Julian right there, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Julian Babolev with Green Spoon Martyr. These are personal comments that don't necessarily represent the views of my organization. So you touched a little bit on the accessory dwelling units policy, and quite frankly, I don't know anything about it. I didn't even know we had one. But I'm wondering if there's been any consideration of, sounds like it requires an affordable housing affidavit. I'm assuming that it's discretionary upon the cities of whether they want to use it or not. Has there been any consideration of doing what a lot of states and cities across the country are doing, which is allowing more density in single-family residential neighborhoods by right, whether that be accessory dwelling units or, God forbid, even duplexes, in order to incentivize these things really to be built from the ground up incrementally, rather than just relying on these large sites with huge developers where the property owner can then gain a large windfall from the increase in property value when they sell the property to that developer, which could potentially wipe out a lot of the, a lot of the money that goes into it.
Thanks, Julian. And apparently I spoke too soon trying to get Ralph to take over. I think certainly, and I think that is part of the strategy for Broward Next. How do we examine, how do we provide these opportunities? So I think that's the perfect kind of comment to submit, because it's definitely on our radar. It's how we kind of count density, include density, incentivize density. So I think nothing's off the table. I think a lot of this comes down to, or is going to come down to, the discussion with the local governments, kind of these protections of single-family neighborhoods and how that gets managed. I think, not to be like a downer about it, but I think there's a fear factor also from the residents, and there's those types of, feelings and emotions that have to be managed also. So.
I think with the accessory dwelling units particularly, we saw in the graph how the rate of retirees just goes to the roof. So that could be a huge, confluence there, because those retirees could then potentially live in an accessory dwelling unit with their, with their grown child
or on
in
their
main
own
house.
home. They could
Yes.
have an accessory dwelling unit that they move into as the homeowner and, rent out the house. Or, there's a lot of different, I think, ways to approach that. So thank you, and I think that's certainly a consideration for the update. Oh, sorry. Mr. Newkirk?
All right, thank you so much. Also, too, what is being done about these cities that don't want to engage in affordable housing projects? Like, prime example, you have the city of Coconut Creek, which is, they don't want to do anything, with affordable housing. They're just still building $750,000 units. Of course, no one or everyone can afford that. And, they pill around with it, but they don't want to deal with, because you have cities that don't want affordable housing there, because they think it's going to attract a certain kind of population. So they don't want that there. And then also, too, what is being done, or what plan is coming in place, we can get together and work with that for the people in the communities, because this is a big problem when affordable housing do come, even though it's very little of it. The people in the communities that live in the community, that live in Broward County all their lives, that live in these cities all their lives, getting the affordable housing, because like I was emphasizing before, the affordable housing is coming up, but you have other ethnic groups getting the affordable housing on the other hand than people that's been living here all their lives. That's a big problem that definitely needs to be addressed immediately.
Thanks, Barbara. So in terms of cities that may be reluctant to accommodate affordable housing, I think the current policy is a peer pressure one. I think is from a couple of perspectives. One is the private sector has made it clear, I think, to all of the electeds in the locations where they reside that retaining and recruiting employees is a real challenge, and that if you do something as simple as look at the pay and class systems in the city of Coconut Creek, go up the pay and class system and see how far you have to go up in their pay and class to reach a wage level that would allow someone to actually live in the city. So I think that there'll be a period of time that will transition, and I think that the local priorities will value affordable housing initiatives. In terms of particularly the deals that we do, the bond deals that generate 100 and 200 unit project, and there's a good recent example. We financed it in conjunction with the state, 110 units that Pinnacle did, called Pinnacle 441 near the casino. And they opened up leasing, and they had 21,000 applications in 1 week. And then they closed the application process. And they do it like they all do, by random number lottery. So they took those 20,000 applications, and they picked the first 110, and they contacted them and said, would you like a unit? So that's the way it works. The shame is that the demand is so overwhelming. We get that when we do our infill homes. We just did, are in the process of building 12 new infill homes in the unincorporated area. We're up to almost 100. And when we open up the application process, the last time we had people camped out in our parking lot for a couple of days. So we take all of them and we do a random number survey. I mean, a random number, and it's whoever comes out, the first 12 get the homes.
That process right there is not working, because that process right there is not working because if you have a neighborhood, right? You have a neighborhood where people stay there all their lives, and you have something going on like that, and now you have other ethnic groups coming inside of the neighborhoods, living there when you got the same people that needs these places that's not getting the places. That should show you right there that process right there is not working. That process is not working. I deal out there. I do community work. People are very upset and they're very frustrated about that. That's not working. Now, what I seen what happened in Pompano Beach a few years ago, they had a fair. They had a housing fair inside of the neighborhood, and what happened was people from the community, they came in with their application fee and they came in with their deposit. It was like a $250 deposit with their application fee, and it was for the people that was inside of the neighborhood. That's not working.
Well, it is working, because we're not allowed to do what you're suggesting that we do with the funds that we're using to make the projects work. We legally cannot do that. We cannot. So that means that you mean to tell me projects are going to continue to be built up in the neighborhood where people need it, and then when people from the community need it, and so that means that it's still going to be open for someone to come from Miami, someone to come from West Palm Beach, someone to come from on the other side of town to get these places. And like I say, it's other ethnic groups that this is happening, that this is continuously happening. Well, you saw from the charts that I put up that there's not a city in Broward County where there's not a need. So yeah, they could come from anywhere in Broward County, and we don't have the discretion to draw a circle around a certain neighborhood and say, okay, the money we just invested to make this project work can only be applied to those those neighborhoods. We just can't do that. Yes, sir. Oh, coming up.
I'll be brief. So it's Karen again from the MPO. Two things, a comment, which is one of my tasks. I'm going to be the project manager for the Broward MPO's first housing coordination plan. Internally, we'll be actually kicking that off this afternoon because the Broward MPO recognizes we have a role in addressing the affordable housing crisis. And we're going to be looking not only initially to identify our own report card and how have our investments maybe unintentionally, negatively, or positively impacted the crisis that we're in, but also looking at opportunities for us to make more or better informed strategic investments so that we are helping address this affordable housing crisis. So I want to let you know about that. So we'll be reaching out to all of our partners, counties and cities, to get your perspectives on this issue in terms of federal transportation funding. So that was number one. But my question is, I was wondering if there's been mapping done that takes the maps that you've shown, but then has overlaid the Primo plan. Certainly, we're really focused on looking at the confluence of housing and transportation, and I know that's something that was very much talked about in the master plan. So if you have those plans available, and then how do they relate to where you all have identified the density bonuses, the increase in population specifically related to Primo. And then thirdly, I was wondering if there's been any consideration for density bonuses, not only with the rail stops, but also with the bus rapid transit lines that have been identified in Primo. I know, that's pretty
Sure.
in the weeds.
No,
So
and
maybe
I'll-
it's something we talk about separately, but
Well, how about I just address number 3?
Barbara, you take it.
I'm just going to take number 3. I think that there's obviously an opportunity to include that in the mapping. I'll get Joe right on that because she's really good at maps. But also the other piece of it is, I think there's certainly an opportunity, but I think there's a struggle and where we've identified the planning for these areas and density bonuses, and if it doesn't end up there and kind of like, and how it is. So there's a bonus along these corridors. So if you want to ramp it up at these kind of what ultimately, to me, it would have to be like in progress and you know that it's going to be. That's why it's within a half mile of passenger rail stations, not just along the corridor. So I think there's never not an opportunity. I think all the things that we talk about are things that need to be considered and policy considerations. And that's why we're here kind of getting the conversation reignited and what we can do for incentives and how they can be improved. So I think it's all on the table.
I would just add that we're already at it. The MPO, FDOT, County Transportation Organization, I probably have had a dozen meetings in the last year, and in a couple of cases, we're working on specific sites that are, they're a year, 2, 3 years out. But it's heartening. One of them, and I can't share that with you now, but is an FDOT property that will be a commuter rail location that they have cut out 5 acres for affordable housing. And we know that works. Nationally, internationally, that's a place that you do it, and that's where the densification needs to go. So layer the Primo plan on top of it is being done, has been done. So you're right on it. Yes, sir.
Hi, Ryan Coots, City of Hollywood. Quick question. So I really like the idea of the scorecard. Is that ever going to be shared with all the cities so you can see what cities are moving forward and what strategies they're implementing to actually increase their density, their affordable housing density?
So yeah, this is a question for
take it.
Ralph.
Oh.
But so about the scorecard.
Oh,
Yeah, so the scorecard is part of the 10-year affordable housing master plan. You want to expand on that? And then I'll kind of take you to the second part of the question.
yeah. So we'll be working with Joe at the Housing Council and putting together that dashboard scorecard. This year, the intent being to use FY 24 is kind of the baseline, even though we're late to it. But the good news is, for the 15 cities or entitlement cities, their annual action plans are just now being submitted to HUD. So by the end of the calendar year, we should have a lot of data from at least those 15 cities that make up 85% of the population and land area to fill in a lot of those cells, including Hollywood. And I know we work with you guys a lot. So yeah, the intent is that's off and running. Yes.
And just the second half, I think about the densification. I mean, those strategies are available, throughout the county. So those are tools that the local governments are going to, the existing tools that we use and whatever additional tools we, come up with and adopt. Those are, all of those are going to go towards kind of enhancing the cities and as they move forward, and will enhance your scorecard and all of the things that you're doing also, all the great work that you're doing.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, he has the microphone already.
Hi.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Jay. You mentioned before that there's two companies that are working on employee-assisted housing. Do you mind mentioning which two those are?
I don't mind, but I'm not going to, because I think they're at the level where they're dealing with real estate decisions. There hasn't been a public announcement. They're trying to put together capital stacks and financing options, and internal to their organizations, how it would work. There's a lot of ways to get at this, everything from a stipend to actually building a building. So we're sitting, they visited with us, we're supporting, all the ideas, but I would rather at this point not mention names.
I understand. Also, if I could ask one more question, is there any funding available for conversions from motels or hotels or office spaces that are being underutilized for especially the studio or one-bedroom units that are in need?
Yeah, there is. In fact, our programs that I mentioned would accommodate that. It's not just new construction. You can do acquisition rehab. It's not exactly apples to apples, but we had a deal just recently that was a 400-unit market rate deal. They came in and said, can we apply to your program to convert 100 of the units to affordable housing? And we funded them. So it wasn't up, but it's almost up. But we would do a hotel that came in and said we want to convert to affordable housing. That would be something we could accommodate, yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning, afternoon. Marcia Barry Smith, Chair of the Broward Housing Council. Just perhaps not so much of a question as a comment. I'm sure that somewhere in these graphs and overlays, there is something being done to make sure that the employed homeless are included in somehow being brought into the numbers that we have, and that we're working with the continuum of care. I'm talking, of course, about those who were homeless, have perhaps been stabilized, but still are facing homelessness because moving from the shelter is impossible or next to impossible.
We are, Marcia, and I talk with Dr. McGuire pretty regularly. She's a good partner. She's a force. And it's a huge problem, but literally in the last 2 months, I've met with 2 different parties. One that is taking old duplexes, quadplexes, 10plexes, and using them for people who are transitioning from the street and then into a longer-term housing situation. Another gentleman that actually has gone in and individually bought over 400 distressed condo units. And, these are 60s vintage. They're not very good stock, except they're built like a block house. They are literally reinforced concrete. And he's converted them, and he's renting them to people at 30 and 60% of median income. Because he's been able to buy them so cheaply. So there are, and that's a hard business model. But there's all kinds of things going on out there right now. And of course, with the recent state legislation, it's going to press even more good thinking about that, I believe. Yeah.
I just wanted to be sure that that population was included.
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, okay, questions online. First one, what kind of county and municipal staffing? Sorry. What kind of county and municipal staffing is required to monitor units after they are built to ensure that they are rented to income listed in the deed restriction or the affordable housing agreement? And also, how do we ensure affordable units are maintained as well as market rate units within the same building?
Sure. So I have 3 staff positions that are filled by monitors that do just that on an annual basis. We go out and meet with the management staff on site. We look at their income certifications to see if they're doing it properly, and then we go in and physically look at the units. Not every one of them. We do it kind of on a random basis. But we also are able to piggyback on the state's requirements for exactly that in deals that have state money into it. So we're able to save a little manpower there. But we do exactly that already. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. Sherry Brown Grosvenor with the Community Foundation of Broward. And thank you for the presentation, as well as the land use presentation. I think they both were very insightful. And I don't want to be Sherry Downer versus Debbie Downer, but first, I'm trying to grasp the numbers and the trajectory that was mentioned. So for example, I heard the number of 600 employees are in the service arena, and that's where the largest gap is, with the housing. And then I heard like by 2030, we're expecting 65,000 more residents. Was that number correct? 65 more thousand people moving? And,
Go ahead.
am I right? Is that the number?
So the first half of it, the easy way to think about it is 1 out of every 2 employees in Broward earning about $40,000 a year. So and the number I mentioned that was just the top 10 industries by employee count was around 600,000. The numbers of service workers are higher than that.
Or higher, okay. So the issue that I see is the pace of the redevelopment keeping up with the need. And I didn't see any charts kind of outlining how much will be redeveloped at whatever time period, so that you could kind of see that the problem will be alleviated, because it just feels like we're getting more people going to move here. We already have the existing issue of the lack of affordable housing, so the problem will be exacerbated, but I don't see where there's a timeline to show how it's going to be addressed through the redevelopment of the various areas of the map that were shown.
Sure.
So-
And I did and this is just me, and this is not scientific, but Dr. Murray has dug into that, and you're right, the ability to keep up with the demand is a real issue.
Okay.
And not only from growth, but from market forces. When rents go up by $1,000 in a couple of years, suddenly the numbers of units that are available at an affordable rent are off the market. So we've kind of like magically put more demand in the bucket. But I did some quickie calculations. I won't take too much time with this, but I calculated up all of the existing programs that we're currently involved in. The gap funding, the state and federal grants, the state sale and 99% program, the Live Local Act, the city's fair share at 500 units a year, intensification at 500 units a year. And I figured over a 10-year horizon, that would add about 35,000 units, which is not bad. We're kind of getting there. And that doesn't count, at the federal level, they're talking about more tax credits at the 12% level, employee-assisted housing, wages, and other, private sector initiatives. So I think we're on the right track, but you're absolutely right. Keeping up and catching up is, it's a big deal. It's hard.
Thank you. I think that information should be pronounced in the presentations moving forward, because you can clearly look at this and say, wow, there's no end in sight when you look at the math, right? So my second question is, how is philanthropy factored into the solution? So as a community foundation, we look for ways that we could impact a variety of issues in the community. And this is one that has surfaced from our board for us to investigate, hence I'm here. And we've been having our ear to it for the longest, but with the level of dollars a philanthropic organization has and the need, how do we see ourselves playing a role? And we've consulted with other foundations across the state, and some of them are opting not to, invest in affordable housing because it's just too big, it's too costly, and there's just too much red tape when, quote unquote, dealing with the bureaucracies and so forth. But what is your thought behind that? What would you tell me in terms of how a foundation or foundations can step into?
I think we should all write Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates' ex-wives a letter every day that asks them for money. But we actually have had some success in Broward. The United Way, I think, it got a $10 million foundation grant. Those are very competitive. I actually don't have a sense of how affordable housing rests in a philanthropic world right now, but it certainly is right up there with food and poverty, I would think. So you might have a better idea than I do in that. Talk to Kathleen Cannon, she'll probably have an answer for you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
We have time for one more question online. And the question I have here is, are there any incentives or opportunities available for affordable home ownership programs in Broward? I've heard in Miami about a lottery for 2 new homes priced under $400K, but I'm curious if there are similar programs or initiatives to support affordable home ownership in Broward.
Yeah, there are a number. As I mentioned, the 15 largest cities all have home ownership programs. So you could contact any of them, including Broward County. We also have nonprofits that are doing home ownership work, particularly Habitat, Urban League, Minority Builders. I think Habitat, I just talked to Nancy yesterday, and they're about to advertise their next tranche of houses. Those are the ways that we deal with that.
One final question, sorry.
Okay.
And then
I'll be quick. Thank you very much for your presentation and the valuable work you do. Really quick, I know Amazon actually does participate in a affordable housing funding. It's limited to certain markets. It's Nashville and I think Seattle. Second is, do you have a sense of when the next gap funding RFP will be released and how much the amount might be? And then,
I do. It'll probably be November, and it'll be between $20 and $25 million.
Fantastic. And then is there any gap funding available on a rolling basis?
On what?
On a rolling basis?
Well, to the extent that the budget rolls around every year, yeah. The board has prioritized affordable housing as our #1 priority, and as long as that's the case, and given what they did with Dr. Murray's recommendation on funding, we'll be okay in terms of our ability to compete for resources. The cities need to step up in the same way, I believe. But there's no regulation other than the board policy regarding looking at affordable housing on an annual basis in the budget process that we have. Okay, enough. I'm hungry. Barbara's tummy is making noises, and I'm leaving.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for everyone that stayed that came for the BrowardNext part of the presentation and that stayed through this one. We'll be in touch. We'll send out a constant contact with links to the presentations page for both of these, for both meetings this morning, and all the information that we talked about, always available. Ralph, Joe, and I are always, and our staffs are always available for you if you have any questions. So we look forward to continuing to work with you. Have a great day. Thank you.